innovation is everything. And that because innovation determines competition. And if you want to stay in business, you have to be good, better. So that's why across the board, Chinese companies have allocated significant budgets for R&D purpose only in order to ensure to stay in business. Because over there, competition is brutal, no mercy. And if you are new to the industry, anything below 10 gigawatt is for many of them a kind of embarrassment.
Welcome to the Smarter E podcast special, a 6-part miniseries recorded live at the Smarter E Europe, which took place in June in Munich. Having visitors from all over the world flocking to Munich to visit the Intersolar, the EES, Power to Drive, and EM Power, we used the opportunity to sit down with some of them and dive deeper into some of the major current topics. Enjoy! As we record this 5th episode of our mini-series, it's the 2nd day of the Smarter E Europe exhibition here in Munich 2023. And this episode is going to be a real pleasure because I'll be able to sit down with an absolute China expert, a topic that we, let's be honest, do not cover enough in the Smarter E series. So this is going to be a very big pleasure for me. And of course, we do need to talk about China. China is just setting record numbers out there, especially if we focus on solar energy, for example. China's cumulative installed capacity just now in 2023 reached 440 gigawatt already. On top of that, a huge increase in PV manufacturing is expected for the coming 2 years. And of course, when you relate that to Europe, it sort of brings up mixed memories and also mixed prospects on the future. The question is the country either a sharp competitor for the European industry, or does Europe need China to jointly develop solar as an industry as such worldwide? And it's actually a great symbiosis. We'll find out in this episode because I'll be speaking to Frank Haugwitz, Senior Advisor at Apricum, the Cleantech Advisory. Frank has been Apricum's representative in China and has been based in Beijing since 2002, just recently relocated to Taipei. He's an absolute expert in solar energy, has an extensive network in the Chinese solar industry, and a deep understanding of Chinese regulation and policy for the solar energy. So in all of that, I'll make sure to get some answers. Welcome, Frank.
Well, thank you for having me. Good morning.
So already threw out some numbers there. China reached 440 gigawatt in 2023 already, and we're not even halfway through the year. So it's quite clear that this is going to be another record growth year for China, probably maybe adding round about 100 to 100 gigawatts additionally at the end of the year. So, of course, China is known for setting records, but what do you really see behind this growth? What are the enablers for that?
Well, the enablers are plenty of them. I mean, government is committed. Solar PV has never been as affordable as it is right now. You see commitments on local level, company level, because China has committed itself to reach a kind of carbon peaking by the year 2030. So we are just 6.5 years short of that. So that means they have to intensify their efforts in order to make this happen. And yes, you mentioned earlier, 440 gigawatts by the end of April this year have already been installed cumulatively. So in the first 4 months, China added almost 50 gigawatt, which is almost, is kind of 40 or 50% of what have been installed last year. Last year was in total 87. So this year might be between 120, 130, maybe even up to 150 gigawatt to be installed. So the enablers are plentiful, and as well, growing, let's say, consciousness about climate change, because China is one of these countries which is likely to be most affected by it. So they have a strong interest in order to deploy more than ever before.
That's something that's really interesting to hear, but let's be honest, here in Europe, we're always snub-nosed and there's always like the "but China" argument in the press, right? So tired of hearing that. So it's really great to hear here that China, this is not only about business, but they actually have a concern about the environment as well.
Well, definitely. I mean, it's in their own interest to do more. I mean, for instance, right now, the first heat wave this year is already rolling over the country. So that means water levels are dropping. Rivers don't carry much water, so they cannot rely on hydropower. So they have to have another source of power. And solar PV, well, I mean, ironically, because given the heat wave, they can generate even more power. So it's very much in their own interest. As well, it's from a business perspective, China has abolished this kind of policy of having a fixed electricity tariff, which used to be fixed set in the first week or second week of the year for the entire year. Now no more. You have this kind of time of use electricity tariffs. So that means you have this during the nighttime, the electricity tariff is the lowest, of course, but daytime are the peak tariff times. And that's where, for instance, commercial and industrial rooftops systems are coming into the picture, which enables the company to lower their overall cost, because they can generate solar PV power cheaper as compared to the power supplied by the big utilities generators.
So China is not only moving fast in terms of investment and capacities, but also fast in terms of regulation and policy.
Oh, a lot. It's amazing how much in terms of regulations has been released during the last 18 months plus minus. It's amazing how it has reached center stage within Chinese politics, because given the magnitude, 440 gigawatt, even within the Chinese context, overall power mix is not a small number. So you have to make sure that A, power is not being curtailed, B, that the grid remains stable, C, that you can supply power at all times when power is needed. Then even because it is not evenly distributed in some areas, you have installed more capacities. So dispatching is becoming crucial. So yes, and in order to make this as well more sustainable and more optimized, that's why the National Energy Administration, which is in the leading governmental entity, has been releasing dozens of regulations addressing these issues, not only for solar PV, and recently more and more about how to combine solar PV with electrical energy storage, batteries. Because even here, China is now in the need in order to have some kind of buffer capacity for the power generated, in the case it should not be consumed all day long during the daytime, so they store it for the time when the power is needed.
So also that's something where we can actually look to China and see how they're doing it, because my personal impression was that storage really is also one of the topics at the moment this year at the Smartery. Of course, it always has its place, because of course we have the EES as part of the 4 main exhibitions here. But I think there's a special emphasis on that topic this year. You can really hear a lot of people wondering how we can also integrate storage on a transmission level, etc. Just very quickly, maybe you have a number, because I remember during the opening of the Smartery conference this year, Sepp Henbest, the former chief economist of Bloomberg NEF and now head of climate transition at HSBC, I think he threw some numbers on the charts there, like just showing how clearly China is dominating investments into clean energy. Do you have also some numbers off the top of your mind there in relation to Europe or the world?
Oh, well, if I'm not mistaken, the last 10 years, China was always the number one investors across the board in terms of all renewables, not only solar PV and wind. Actually, solar PV has been now just overtaken wind power in terms of installation, power generation capacities. Yeah. Well, no, on top of my head, I don't have these billions of investments, but I thought they make up a significant share of the global total annual investments earmarked for renewable energies. That is true. And more is about to come. So far, we just have been talking about, let's say, downstream deployment. But what about the upstream? Even more is coming along. You mentioned earlier that, and for a couple of years already, China has been the number one manufacturer by far. And no other, let's say, country or region is anywhere close to that. So here too, because to mobilize money at these days for, let's say, production capacity expansion is of no concern.
That's really something interesting that I would love to dive a little bit deeper into, because apparently, according to a recent report of the IEA, the global manufacturing capacity will double in 2023 and then again in 2024. Of course, China is making up for 90% of that increase. But might this actually mean that we're heading into an oversupply? And if so, what sort of effect would that have on the Chinese solar export policy?
Well, the overcapacity issue has been in place for a couple of years. It's not a new phenomenon, definitely not. It's just getting bigger year by year. And in particular, since the beginning of the ongoing 14th five-year plan, which started in 2021, when in particular on the local level, governments thought well, renewable energies is the next new growth engine, from an economic perspective. Hence, they were encouraging across the board existing players, non-existing, new players, etc., to get engaged into renewable energy, in particular in upstream, because this is creating jobs and tax revenues for the local governments, because they are running short of money once in a while. So that means they need new additional streams of revenues coming in. So yes, overcapacity is going to be massive, and it's already here. One example, the price for polysilicon dropped between October, November last year and today by already 50%. So we are getting in an area where polysilicon is getting really cheap, so to say. That means, consequently, module prices will witness a rapid price erosion soon. And I'm not sure who amongst Chinese will be able to sustain such kind of competition, because many of them are running on small margins. It's the volume which makes the business, no longer the single margin as it was in the past. Today, the margins are so razor thin, so that means you go by volume as a manufacturer. So it means a couple and dozens of companies which I just visited during the SNEC in Shanghai 3 weeks ago. They are brand new, founded 2018, 2019, but then COVID came, or Corona, so they haven't had a chance to see the light. Now they are emerging and they are very hungry, and they are pushing towards lower prices in order to make their investment happen. I mean, that they recover their investment they have undertaken 3, 4, 5 years ago. So overcapacity, yes, is a massive issue. And in terms of export, it will be just more brutal, even more competitive.
Now, I mean, that of course adds a quite significant message to the current discussion that's also happening here at the Smarter Europe, and that is, are we able to bring back manufacturing capacity to Europe? The US is also aiming into a similar direction, trying to maybe get some domestic PV manufacturing, but I guess that price development will make that even more unrealistic. So is China actually looking into this, trying to move maybe production outside of China to the US or to Europe, as they did already also with gigafactories partly?
Well, as of now, let's say a couple of Chinese companies are more in a kind of observer status. So they watch and see how things are unfolding. I mean, as of now, there isn't anything near towards a kind of local content requirement policy. And I doubt that will be ever happen here across Europe, put it this way. So there is no immediate need to relocate production capacities or set up new production capacities across Europe, because until now the ball is rolling. That means there are no restrictions or limitations or requirements which would reduce the volume of modules exported from China into the European market. But some of them, given now the overall momentum within the EU in particular, in order to bring back PV manufacturing to Europe, because it has been there a decade plus ago. But details are still in the making. Companies are running the numbers and try to figure out how and to which extent they might get engaged in the upstream sector. It is, to answer your question, no, definitely there's an opportunity for established or existing European manufacturers to get more engaged in upstream activities, definitely. Because you have, technology-wise, you have an edge, so you are pretty much on par, maybe in some areas a little behind or ahead of the Chinese competition. So yes, but if any company decides to move into upstream, wholeheartedly, anything else would not pay off in the long run, according to my humble opinion here. If so, and then make up a multiple year plan, because the demand is given across Europe. And you have a sound, let's say, customer base who are in favor of made in Europe, for instance, for whatever reason, but they say, well, made local, buy local, install local, etc. So, but it will be a tough game, to stand up to the very significant existing and future production capacity subject to Chinese ownership. That is true.
So, all in or nothing. Let's just for a moment imagine that theoretically there will be actually a more heterogeneous distribution of production capacities worldwide in the future. Maybe not 90 to 10, but let's say 70 to 30. Theoretically, would that be an opportunity for China and the Chinese PV industry? Would there be like an upside?
Definitely. I mean, they too are looking for how to minimize costs. So that means why they have set up production facilities across Southeast Asia. They're looking in the Indian market. They're looking at other potential locations around the world. Because at the end of the day, if you are closer to your customer, I mean, you save on the transportation and on the logistic costs, for instance. Yeah. Or if you have local content requirement policies, you are able to serve the market from within these markets. Yeah. Not to mention you have this kind of spillover effects. Assume you are in market X, Y, Z and you have a production facilities, so that helps to develop the local supply chain as well. So yes, Chinese companies are looking at, for instance, what recently has been released by the US with the Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah, so that is an opportunity for them in order to serve the market from within as a local manufacturer. I'm sure a couple of companies are looking at across Europe where might be an opportunity, what kind of incentives, local incentives, might be offered if you as a foreign or Chinese investor would like to set up a production facility here. And if it's only module assembly, yeah, that would be a start. Or the missing link across Europe would be wafer. Maybe there might be Chinese wafer manufacturers considering to open up a wafer fab here somewhere across Europe. So definitely this is an opportunity for all involved across the globe, whether you are Chinese, Indian or European or American in this case.
Now, earlier you said that they're also moving really fast when it comes to policy and regulation. I guess they're also moving fast in terms of innovation and applying PV in non-traditional ways. So what's happening in regards to floating PV or agri-PV in China? And if so, what are different approaches compared to Europe?
Different approach to Europe is, if you talk about floating or agriculture PV, take us Germans as an example. Before we installed something, I mean, on a commercial basis, we have a multiple year-long R&D project, investigation, study, optimize, and then you have a perfect product, so to say, but it takes years to get there. The Chinese have a different philosophy. If they say, well, the product is kind of 80% ready, put it out there into the field. Get field data, yeah, and then the data you get from the field, you can feed them back into your production process, and you can further optimize the product. That means in a significantly shorter time, your product is ready. It's a different mindset. So here, in the early days, floating PV started in China in 2015, 2016, plus minus around. Well, it's just taking off here in Europe or Germany, in the Netherlands, much more already, or in Spain and Italy, for instance, yeah, but on a smaller scale. The Chinese go out, well, do a 20 megawatts, do a 50 megawatt, do a 100 megawatt. Yeah? They simply go for a scale from the start. It's a different kind of mindset or approach. Yeah? And in terms of innovation is everything. And that because innovation determines competition. And if you want to stay in business, you have to be good, better. So that's why across the board, Chinese companies have allocated significant budgets for R&D purpose only in order to ensure to stay in business. Because over there, competition is brutal, no mercy. And if you are new to the industry, anything below 10 gigawatt is for many of them a kind of embarrassment from, let's say, from a production point of view. As well, a more open mindset in terms of deployment. The Chinese, why not combine this, make it a hybrid system? So you combine hydropower, you combine it with a wind farm, and you put solar PV in the next to combined with storage, etc. Here, well, it takes maybe for some of players that might be a little bit unconventional, so to say. Yeah. So here, new ideas are being implemented with a slight delay compared to Chinese players, I would say. But innovation is everything.
Now, you said that 10 gigawatt almost is an embarrassment in China. So what numbers are we talking about when talking about floating PV or agri-PV, or what sort of market share or future predictions?
Well, right now, the annual, let's say, floating PV in terms of installed capacity is something between 1 and 2 gigawatts overall. But sometimes it's not strictly floating. Yeah, it's kind of as well putting on stilts. You know, so it's not kind of hard to track this down. What is new now is offshore floating PV, something in a very early stage here in Europe, in the Netherlands, for instance. And the province of Shandong and Jiangsu, both of them are coastal provinces. Yeah, they have identified vast areas for offshore floating PV. And here they have earmarked already something between 10 and 20 gigawatt, yeah, for the years to come. Yeah, so not immediately, because they too. And the reason why, because China in the eastern part is densely populated, and to ensure food security is just more important compared to generate green power, so to say. So that means you have, in some areas, you're running out of space for ground-mounted systems. So that's why offshore floating PV is an option, or agriculture PV, because you're making use of the dual use concept. Below the panels, harvest the crops. Above the panels, you harvest the sun. So that's why agriculture PV as well is very much booming in the eastern part of China. And there too, annually, something as well in the order between 1 and 2 gigawatt at least, if not more.
That really is impressive, because when it comes to Germany, it's mostly still pilot projects run by Fraunhofer in a small area in Bavaria, to put it very sharp, which of course is great. And we had the pleasure of talking to them in this podcast as well, but we're a far cry from really rolling it out in big scales.
But the Chinese too, they learned the lessons. Yeah? I mean, they are more quick in putting out, let's say, a new type of application. Yeah. So not waiting until it is a ready-made 100% perfect product. So they too, in the early stages of floating PV and agriculture PV, went through a financially painful learning process. So not everything is just better just because you are faster. Definitely not. Yeah. So there were these kind of stories where they simply covered everything for this agriculture PV. Yeah, but some crops do still require some sunshine, yeah. So that didn't work out well, yeah. So they switched to mushrooms, and that worked in this case, yeah. So yes, exactly. So the Chinese too are going through a often financially painful learning process, yeah. But are very keen in further optimizing whatever application or product they have.
So I really loved that story here, that anecdote about the mushrooms at the end, and really impressed all the numbers, hearing it from you, hearing the pace in China, really getting the inside perspective. I think we really need to listen to that much, much more. It's so easy to be stuck in a Eurocentric viewpoint of the world. And I think we certainly need more messages from China and about the pace that's running there. But also great to hear that there is still some validity to that very scientific and thought through process we have here in Europe. Now, you traveled all the way to be here at the Smarter E Europe from Taipei. Is there anything the other way around, where you think that you really can get some inspiration or insights that you will not be able to get in Taipei?
Well, I haven't had the time yet to hit the floor. Yeah, so me too, I'm keen to see what is new here on the ground, because each and every, let's say, region had its own, let's say, characteristics or features. So not applications you see in some regions or countries, you don't see them necessarily in other markets as well. So I wonder, here's definitely towards residential in combination with storage, yeah, in combination with charging for the EV, etc., etc. That is something still in an early stage development in China. Not that they don't do anything in the EV sector, definitely not. Yeah, a lot. But this kind of holistic approach, yeah, that you combine whatever is available or deems possible in a given location. So here I would like to see what could be brought back to, in this case, the Chinese market or the Taiwanese market, so to say. Yeah. Kind of here as well from the regulatory aspect, it might be interesting how we discussed earlier about how to bring back PV manufacturing to Germany and Europe, so to say. So what might here the latest developments? Because a couple of colleagues over there, they are definitely keen to learn. So how is it going with all the discussion about to bring back or to rebuild PV manufacturing across Europe? Yeah? So that's kind of the information I'm looking out here for.
Thanks so much for joining me today, Frank. That's really been a very interesting ride. Thanks a lot for all these insights, and I hope you enjoy the exhibition.
Likewise, pleasure talking to you.
So with our mini-series recorded live at the Smarter E Europe in Munich in June, we've already been to South America, having a look at Brazil, we've been to Asia, having a look at China. Now it's high time to visit the African continent. Specifically, we'll have a look at a project and business model run by Boreal Light. Amongst many things, they run an integrated solar water desalination project at Lodwar Hospital in Kenya. A very fascinating project that is not only about replacing diesel generators with PV, but creating multiple cascading additional benefits. So make sure to stay tuned for the 6th and final episode of our miniseries.